Awesome. Awesome. Very well. So thank you so much for joining again, everyone. We have another office hours today, and with with a guest that first time is joining us for EPF office hours, Tony. I'm not gonna try to pronounce the surname. Thank you, narration. Thank you so much for being here today. And yeah, so another office hours, and this time we have a researcher or more of an applied research person here. Um, it's been it's been a while since we had somebody from this category. We have some people from research, somebody from development, and I think Tony is combined, or his team combines these um, in an important way where they prototype the latest research on Ethereum. And yeah, I mean, you might seen Tony's proposals on ETH research, seen him in the research discussion, but also learned from a lot of his visualization, a lot of his work on actually uh, observing what's happening on the chain, the consensus. So yeah, thanks so much again for being here. And before I open the questions to the audience, I would like them to get to know you a bit better. If you can tell us more about yourself, about your background, about where you're coming from, how did you even get to work on Ethereum, and what brought you to the research?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. Great to be here. So, to start with, I started with Bitcoin. So before I got into Ethereum, my passion was on Bitcoin. And then in 2017 to 2018, I slowly kind of moved over to Ethereum. And it took a while. So I did my studies by the time, and then after my studies, I started doing open source work on Ethereum. So I was very active on collecting data, writing data scripts. Um, I hosted a lot of data. I hosted some APIs and that kind of stuff. So um, those were kind of smaller projects I just did, yeah, in parallel to my studies. And after that, I did a PhD, and my PhD was then very much focused on Bitcoin privacy. So this was the time around like 2019 to 2021, a little later, and I was very much interested in all the mixing technologies that existed on Bitcoin, like Wasabi and Samurai Wallet. Mario is already. I know you like those mixers a lot too. So yeah, it's a very interesting technology, and I was by the time thinking how this could potentially be applied to Ethereum. And CK technology got quite good by the time. Circum was a very useful tool to use to write things like Tornado Cache, and and this was actually then my start into getting way deeper into Ethereum. I was very much coming from the CK side, although I have no cryptography background or not even anything similar. My background is actually in economics and law. But yeah, I very quickly drifted away from that and focused on Ethereum. And in 2022, I then joined the EF. So first as a part-time employee and then as a full-time employee when the applied research group was formed. This was a new research team by the time that was meant to bridge kind of the gap between research and yeah, core protocol development. And yeah, with the latest restructuring, I'm now leading the protocol prototyping team. I'm very much focused on, yeah, exactly as Mario already described, bringing research into a more tangible development phase and helping people to get ideas implemented, prototyped, do simulations, figure out what we can do to improve the protocol. So very much on both sides, on the research side and on the co-development side, I would say. Yeah, I will stop at that point.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Tony. No, that's really great, and yeah, it's amazing to hear it from your words because I mean, yeah, I was agreeing there a lot with the first part. Like you were interested in the Bitcoin privacy because when I was joining EF, I was actually deciding between working with Wasabi and with EF. So I'm very much familiar with this tech, and it's great to hear you're coming from this place. But yeah, jumping to the present or maybe to the future, what is the protocol prototyping, or you specifically, what are you working on these days? Which initiatives? What is the current research, the current prototyping, or something to be excited about?
So I think it's fair to say you can say that the protocol prototyping team, we look like 1 or 2 forks ahead, maybe 3 forks into the future, but not like further out. And this means right now the focus is of course on both Fusaka and Glamsterdam. So there are big EAPs coming up on Glamsterdam, EPBS and block level access lists, and many members of the team are involved in both of them. So for example, Rahul is doing a lot of work on making sure we get the testing right for block level access list. Jihoon has been helping to make sure we get to a first DevNet as soon as possible. I have been, yeah, contributing to the specs and making sure, yeah, core devs, yeah, work in a coordinated way. So block level access list is definitely one of the very big topics right now. And then we got 6-second slots, which is also a proposal that is not like scheduled for inclusion yet, but yeah, people seem to like it, and there are already like specs done. So from the specking side, we are basically done with 6-second slots on that front, and we even have a first DevNet already. So this is all work that falls into what the prototyping team is doing. And apart from that, we are also working on ideas that are a little further out in the future. For example, there is a recent idea called payload chunking, which is an idea to just split the blocks that we have today into smaller chunks to make sure that those chunks can be executed in a parallel way. Basically, we want to do something while downloading the block, um, parallelizing between bandwidth and CPU. And this is also one of the very interesting topics we have been looking into very recently.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Tony. Yeah, a lot of interesting research. I recently heard from Rahul, our former EPF fellow, that you guys are bowlers. So I would very much like to push that narrative with the balls. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, thank you so much, Tony. That's great. Yeah, that's looking great, Alpha. And like, I'm wondering, how do you see, so being sort of a middle in the engineering and the research, like, how do you see the difference there, or this overlap? Like, where is it? What are the challenges, like where is, how do you see the difference between the research and the engineering, and how are you able to merge them? Uh,
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's not like there is a binary split between the two. So every researcher contributes to um, core Ethereum work and vice versa. Every core developer, by knowing how the protocol works in depth, also contributes to EAPs and stuff. I think it's probably fair to say that most EAPs come from core devs. Maybe it's like 50-50 between researchers and core devs. I have no clue actually. But there are many of those EAPs where you must be a core dev to come up with those EAPs, right? You must know the protocol, how it is actually coded, and just looking at the specs might sometimes not be enough. I'm not saying that researchers don't look at the core clients, right? I think it's difficult to tell, difficult to categorize people by saying core dev or researcher because it's way more nuanced. But um, in general, I think it's more like the time frame you're thinking in, right? Are you more focused on the next or the second next fork, or are you more focused on how do we, for example, scale the chain in like 5 to 10 years? And of course, different time horizons then also lead to, yeah, um, people working in a different way. Of course, we don't need a presentation about, for example, CK EVMs every week on all codefs. which is very much focused on the more short-term time horizon.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Tony. Yeah. Awesome. Guys, I think we covered a lot of context about Tony and his work. Do you guys have any questions? Please feel free to raise your hand and go ahead and ask if you're curious about something about the current and the future research on the Ethereum, on the consensus, on the so on. Um, Feel free to raise your hand. We have also some questions in the backlog from people who couldn't make it here. But let's start with the live ones. Yeah, Lee.
Yeah, hi. Actually, I want to follow the Mario's question because your background looks very uh, interesting for me because I also just finished my PhD and just gave my defense. So I'm wondering, uh, what's the difference between working as a PhD, doing more research, versus working for the Human Foundation as a researcher and also co-developer, the skill wise and like mental wise and all this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice question. Thank you. To compare the two, of course, there are researchers within the Ethereum Foundation that there whose day-to-day work looks like the work that you would expect to see at the university. So I think there, while for example my team is very much somewhere in between research and core development, and thus also how we work or how we approach certain topics is different from the academic work. We still kind of try to contribute somehow to academia, even if it's not through research papers, then for example through ETH Research, ETH Magicians, or just by having an Ethereum Foundation blog post that documents some topic very well. So my personal experience when I kind of left university and joined the EF was that I just continued doing what I was already doing because I, of course, had to write papers and stuff. But in the end, I always try to make my research more tangible and communicate it to a broader community. So as soon as I then left university and joined DAF, this was then basically what I was doing full time, researching topics, um, trying to push them further and communicating that to the community. So it felt like there were way less restrictions, right? If you look at ETH Research, you can publish anything basically there. Of course, if the admins don't like it, they might delete it. But essentially, there's not like a formal restriction. So I very much like it. I was always a fan of the open source movement and stuff. So it felt great to have places like ETH Research, ETH Magicians, all codevs calls, the testing calls, all the public calls essentially, where the progress is happening. So to me, it still feels like a very cool that so many people contributing to one thing remotely from different time zones, and we still manage to ship like big upgrades to a code base that is not like simple or exists anywhere. So I was directly drawn into that, and for me, university was then I was considering continuing in university, but then getting deeper into contributing to Ethereum. Yeah, it felt like the better fit.
Yeah, thanks. I agree. Some research form and all these are very helpful. I also learned a lot, very detailed thing from them about my research. But I also feel there is another challenges because these forms they are quite hidden from the general research or like a paper. If they're there, it's quite easy to identify. Okay, this is a part I need to read or something like that. But for the discussion on the some research forum, you need to know who is the one you want to follow his discussion, and they're usually very long, and also the time range could be like years. So and things changed during like this time, so you need to have the clue what happened there. So it's kind of like a little bit of challenge to for some topics. But in general, I feel like all these blogs and like Ethereum blogs and all the core developers blogs are really, really helpful. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree with that. Would be nice if like places like ETH Research get like more visibility or something. It's definitely a very old forum, so it could definitely need a revamp at some point. But yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah, I can also agree, and like especially like with ETH research and ETH magicians, it's kind of hard. You know, people would like to merge them. People would like to just like revamp the whole thing, but there is no good way to do it, I guess. Yeah, JC has another question.
Hi, this is Jimmy. I wonder what is the relationship between the PSE, like previously called Privacy and Scaling Exploration, they changed the name, and the applied research. Like it, I think there's some overlapping, but I like how do you differentiate like what works belong to the PSE, what works belong to applied research, and do you guys collaborate or coordinate the works between these two groups?
Yeah, this is a good question. There's generally collaboration between the teams, but where the prototyping team is more focused on more the general topics, like how can we improve L1, um, which falls under the tracks. So let me start differently. There are three tracks, right? Like Scale L1, Scale L2, and Improve UX. This was like a recent shift, and yeah, it felt like the community very much agreed on those three tracks being pursued. And the UX track includes things like getting privacy. And as far as I know, and I cannot speak for the PSE team. I'm just following their work as a as a person within the EF, and they are very much focused on getting the privacy into the UX side. So making sure that we get the UX stuff right when it comes to privacy. And I think they just recently had a blog post where they published some upgrades on what they're focused on and how they want to contribute on that front. Whereas getting back to prototyping, um, you will see people on the prototyping team contributing to EIPs, for example, things that need protocol changes, not something that can be done on the application layer, and analyzing EIPs, simulating them, and of course prototyping them. So yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from, because it's like privacy, scaling, and exploration. This is a name that um, yeah, summarizes quite a lot. But I would say in the end, it's very much, the focus is very much on privacy nowadays. And this is just my personal feeling, right? Maybe if someone from PSE is here, they could correct me. But yeah, I cannot really speak in their name. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean the team was recently like merged to become a proper EF team, and their main focus is privacy, as you say. Like it's not just like they gravitate towards it, but that's their main thing now. They are now privacy exploration, I guess, PE, or the privacy team. So yeah, JC, hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it's more like they, if this is like, if this is 100% true what you said, and they are really only focused on privacy and not scaling anymore, then you could really nicely separate it into, we are more on the prototyping, is more on the prototyping scale L1, scale L2 things, whereas privacy exploration would then be more on the UX side. Although I wouldn't really say this is a good differentiator there. very different teams in the end.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, we can't kind of get to a question I wanted to ask earlier. I want to give more space for the folks, but this might be a good time to ask about privacy. I mean, you coming from the privacy background, like, what do you think about the privacy on Ethereum, or where are we heading? Maybe some of these new posts by the PSE privacy team. Whether there is something that excites you, something to prototype, maybe.
Yeah, I think privacy is one of the very important topics we have to get right. In general, UX, right? The whole UX topic is just super important. Includes many things that might also need protocol changes, of course, like faster finality and stuff. But privacy is one of those things that can be solved on the application layer. So, for example, wallets, implementing mixers, things like Railway, or yeah, there are other solutions similar to what Railway is doing. And then on the other side, there are mixers, and then there is stealth addresses, right? So we basically have two technologies there. Mixers are of course more effective because mixers give you untraceability, which is a very strong privacy guarantee, whereas stealth addresses only give you unlinkability. I can very much recommend the Monero white paper for context, for more context about those terms and how to define them. It's a very interesting white paper. It's, if you Google CryptoNote white paper, you will find it. It's kind of old, but if you read it, it still feels like it was written very recently. Very nice. So definitely would say privacy is super important, and we should get it right on the UX. I don't think we should enshrine something, right? There are proposals like Wormhole and enshrining that. I'm not sure if we are ready for that. I just think that's a really big thing, and we should be very careful with that.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much, Tony. Yeah, it's been a while since somebody called it CryptoNode, or I heard the original name. That's so cool. I also I've been following some latest Monero stuff. They are actually having hard forks soon, so we are not the only one shipping hard forks. There's some interesting privacy features
But
there
you're
as
not
well.
talking about the 51% attacks on Monero now.
Oh, no. Just
Okay.
like research, and new client release client now. RC for new version that gives you basically unlimited set, because right now we have the Ring Signature 16. I'm not gonna dive into Monero on this call. I just wanted to mention that, like, it's since you brought it up, like a lot of research in other ecosystems, because we have a question kind of segueing there, also coming from your background, and some other things to follow. The question is whether you still follow the research over in Bitcoin, for instance, around BitVM. The question from the GitHub.
Yeah, unfortunately, not as much as I would like to, or as I did in the past. I'm still trying to keep up with what is happening, but I'm not like, especially with those recent discussions, I'm not like trying to stay ahead with whose opinion on yeah, the blog spam, the spamming topic is what and stuff. I try to keep up to date with everything that is happening on the technical level. So I still think it's super interesting, and I very much like Bitcoin as it is today. Of course, that's also easy to do because there's not that much happening. So saying that I stay like ahead with the technical changes is, of course, if you look just at the chain, right? Here, the question was specifically about BitVM, which is of course doing stuff on top of Bitcoin. So I'm not closely following those things. I'm definitely aware of them. I'm still a user of Bitcoin, so I still use the chain, and And yeah, but I haven't really engaged in BitVM or something.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Tony. Yeah, I think it's always good to just have open mind and understand what's happening elsewhere and be able to inspire ourselves and yeah, not to worry about the toxic discussions. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah. Other chains are doing great stuff, and I think it's very valuable to look at other chains too and check out what they're doing.
Okay, yeah, Dmitris, hopefully back to Ethereum now.
Yeah. Back to him. So first of all, I don't know if my message was visible. So now the name of PSE is Privacy Stewards of Ethereum. That's the new name. And yeah, I have a question that I asked myself and I cannot answer it. So basically, I looked Monero on Wikipedia and it says that it has untraceable transactions.
Mhm.
Do we want this on Ethereum? Like, let's assume that on the technical side it's possible. Do we want to really make it impossible to associate a physical, like a human being, with the transactions that they do on the network, or not?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, right? If we are fine with it, we would probably ship a feature like there is already an ELP for that. If we are not, we might not ship that feature. Right now, it feels like the community is not fine with enshrining untraceability into the L1 because untraceability needs mixing, right? There is no way to do untraceability without mixing. And of course, you can create mixers that are like you only mix with trusted entities or you exclude entities that that cannot yeah bypass certain manual checks. And I think it's hard to really think about enshrining it on L1. There are many risks with it. Mixers on Ethereum come with CK cryptography. Um, this is a big question. Are we fine with enshrining CK into the L1? And then, of course, there are those questions like, okay, if we had a mixer that is natively available on Ethereum L1, so available to call within the EVM, would the ETH balance still be auditable, or could someone discovering a bug and somehow withdrawing unlimited ETH from that contract, and we would not even realize, right? Or we would realize very late because you only realize when so much ETH was withdrawn that it should not have been possible. So yeah, it's a question everyone should ask himself in the community. Like, where do we stand on this? It feels like right now the general opinion is we keep that for the application layer and don't really tackle it on the protocol level.
Thanks. So maybe a more specific question about this was like, if we go for it, then it would be something like accepting like illicit activities, in the sense that you can go through Ethereum and then no one could notice. And then if we go on the application layer and they allow mixing, isn't that doesn't that mean that permissionless the permissionless aspect getting weaker, because they will have to choose who is like a trusted entity to mix and who is not. So then you cannot really get
Mhm.
transactions going through without having an entity saying you are a person to trust or not.
Yeah, I think you can either think about it. I think you have to be very pragmatic here when it comes to privacy. Of course, we want privacy for the weak, kind of, right? So that everything should be transparent, but we still want privacy for individual, for example. And I would argue you still have privacy if you are able to exclude certain people. For example, if I'm running a privacy service, for example, on Wasabi Wallet, you have like this entity that runs the privacy service. This entity cannot really observe anything or steal money, but there is one entity that could theoretically censor you by not including you. I think this is still fine, because then this entity can selectively decide who will join the anonymity set and who will not join the set. And then there are definitely entities that you don't want to be in an anonymity set with, because it's very strongly against morals and all those things. So I think it's kind of nice to have things like railway. So railgun is the mixer, I think, or railway. And what they do is you deposit, and then I think for an hour your deposit is just sitting there while anyone, or well, they are checking that it doesn't come from some illicit source, basically checking some sanction lists or something. I don't know actually, but I think that's actually fine. I think that's a pragmatic compromise between no privacy and some very weak privacy that doesn't give you anything. So here you still have a great anonymity set, if of course the provider doesn't exclude like too many people.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. Yeah, it's definitely a very interesting discussion. The opt-in privacy or the default. And Bella has a question. Let's continue with that. We still have time.
Yeah, sure. First, thanks, Tony, for coming to speak with us today. My question was, I just want to get a better idea of what the prototyping looks like. Like, I'm working on Fossil right now. I know Jihoon made a Geth implementation. Is that normally how it goes forward? Your guys' team makes a Geth implementation, or is it more just trying to annoy all the other protocol teams to help you guys out, or how's that all work out?
Yeah, great question. And it's exactly as you already observed there. So the range is from helping with an EAP, writing ETH research posts, and coordinating stuff on ETH magicians, to actually getting into client code bases and implementing stuff ourselves. So I would say this is kind of the range we're moving in between. And yeah, so client implementation is definitely something we do. Also like spec work or testing. So we touch many parts of the protocol, like from the specs to client code to tests to the ideation on ETH research. So very much flexible, hard to really pin it down. But yeah, going into code bases is definitely something we do.
So thank you, Tony. Before we move on to Lee, I wanted to ask one more question from the GitHub issue, which is related to this about protocol prototyping. What are the skills and knowledge that the protocol prototyping team is looking for? More directly, what makes a successful prototyping researcher?
Mhm. Yeah, I would say the skills are. I would say people in our team have a very strong background when it comes to Ethereum in general. So you have to understand how does the protocol work, and it's very beneficial to not only focus on the execution layer or the consensus layer, but to have a somehow holistic view on both of them. So I would say this is like probably the most important thing there, like really understanding how everything works. And this is not just understanding it from a very high level perspective, but I would say understanding where to find things in the specs. So it's definitely very hands-on work. There's a lot of coding. We we go into client bases, do things ourselves, or contribute to the specs, contribute to EAPs. So I would say a technical background is definitely beneficial there. Apart from that, there's not really kind of a model of a candidate for the protocol prototyping team. It's more like a person that is very motivated in getting things done and in a short time horizon, speaking of 1 to 2 years. So we are not like researching on things for like multiple years. It's more like looking at the protocol as it is today, identifying some shortcomings, and then fixing them.
Very well, thank you. Yeah, let's continue with Lee.
Yes, thanks. Actually, your question is also like something I also interested, and my question gonna be like because you mentioned it would be nice to have a good understanding of the protocol. Uh, I mean, before the merge, we still have the like we still can refer to the yellow paper, but I don't think yellow paper is still valid now. Um EPF Wiki is really helpful. I learned a lot from there, but it looks like it's still hard to say. I really understand how like very deep how CL EL works and how they interact with each other. Do you recommend any resource or any way to learn that?
Yeah, this is definitely true. So it's not like easy to learn everything and how things work together and stuff. So like what I just described as Ethereum knowledge, I think there is a lot of knowledge that people can have, and it's not like a binary thing. So totally agree with that. Regarding resources, I very much like the specs on both sides. So there is the Ethereum execution specs repo and the consensus specs repo. And to me, it's always like I'm actually no matter on which side I actually look at the specs, I like them on both sides. And I'm always fascinated by how nice Python code some of my colleagues can write. So I really when I need to know anything, I nowadays go and look at the specs. But I remember when I started and I was not yet familiar with the specs. On the CL side, there is Ben Eddington's ETH2 book. I will post a link into the chat. I guess most of you know it anyway. But yeah, I can very much recommend this one. ETH2 book, yes. So it's basically a documentation about everything happening on the CL. It's not full yet, it's not complete, but it's a very good explainer about the rationale and the design choices taken that led to the merge. On the EL side, that's more difficult, I guess, yeah, because you were referring to the yellow paper, something like this that is updated doesn't really exist as far as I know. From yeah, I would just refer to the execution specs at that point because there were a lot of changes to the execution specs, so to the ELs recently, and they are very readable today. They were already quite nice in my opinion, but now they are really great and yeah. I would get familiar with the specs. So if you want to get very into a technical rabbit hole within Ethereum, I can very much recommend working with the specs as soon as possible because this is just like understanding how Ethereum actually works or how blockchain works in a very granular way that makes it much easier in the future to then come up with potential changes, knowing what is actually possible and what not.
Yeah, thanks. I agree. Like the Python spec actually is quite nice to read in general. Um, uh, my feeling is like I still feel struggling with the whole architecture, like virtualization of the visualization of the whole architecture. So sometimes I feel struggling to understand uh, the coordination between different parts.
Yeah,
That's
it's
my
the
feeling.
same for me, to be honest, right? It's probably everyone has that feeling that it's very complex from time to time, and you cannot be an expert on every small detail there. It's from what my experience was always like, okay, I was working on one specific small nuanced niche topic, and suddenly the topic escalated and touched many other things, and you had to learn more and more. And in the end, when you worked on enough of those niche topics, you will have covered the whole the whole protocol. So it's just, yeah, it needs some time, and for me it's still a journey, I would say.
Great, thanks. I remember one of another guest in previous like office hour also mentioned that you cannot imagine you can directly know all the stuff of Ethereum. It's already a very huge system now, but getting from a niche field and gradually learn it makes things much like reasonable and easier. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you guys. We have last quarter of an hour. Um, keep asking questions, please. Raise your hands. I have one more uh, one more question from the GitHub about how you prioritize what you work on. I'm sure you have a lot of ideas that you don't have time to pursue. So how do you choose priorities? If you're speaking, you're muted. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, was just saying, never actively thought about it, to be honest, because um, yeah, my personal work was very much aligned with those three tracks, like scaling L1, scale L2, improve UX. Same for the work from my team. So there are topics like block level access lists, which falls under the scaling category, or the 6 second slots, which is improve UX topic. Fossil, for example, which is great for UX. Other topic like in Fusaka, we will have a, a smaller transaction gas limit, right? Transactions will only be able to consume 2 to the power of 24 gas, and not like the whole block gas limit anymore. Those are all changes that I've been involved in recently. Not like fossil and stuff. This was more from my team, but the gas limit thing I've been involved recently. And from a prioritization thing standpoint, I was just this was more like me deciding I want to prioritize that work for now, and not like someone telling me I have to do that now. And it's very similar for everyone working on my team. So there's not really someone telling us what to work on. So everything is picked up by us or not. And from a prioritization standpoint, we have to then just be smart when it comes to what are the actual priorities for the community, for the core devs, for core researchers, for everyone, for every stakeholder involved. And luckily, we have a very nice all core devs process. Things are planned well ahead of time, so we know what is scheduled for Glamsterdam when it comes to headliner proposals. We know it already. All the other proposals that are now in the proposed for inclusion stage, there will be a deadline in a few weeks. So as of that point, we can basically start looking into all of those EAPs and evaluate which one is worth to ship in Amsterdam and which one not. So yeah, this is very much how I think about prioritization there. We're in the end serving Ethereum, and we want to make sure that our priorities align best with what the community, what all the stakeholders want Ethereum to be.
Amazing, thanks. That's a great answer. Folks, do we have any more questions for Toni? Please use the opportunity. Don't let me ask all the questions. Anyone? I'll just try. Okay, Shane, go ahead.
Yeah, just curious about how the idea of payload chunking came about in the first place. Because you guys were just talking about like work priorities, but I'm just curious about what is the flow for how to come up with ideas. Yeah, you kind of alluded to earlier that you have great understanding of the EL and the CL and their interactions. That kind of opens up the door to be able to come up with these ideas. But I'm curious if it's more like you do brainstorming sessions with a few guys, or maybe at like Dev Connect, those type of conferences, these type of ideas come about. Yeah, just curious the flow there for inspiration.
Yeah, so let me give you two examples. For example, for block level access list, it was really just a few people in Sicily with a whiteboard brainstorming and then coming up with ideas how we can introduce some form of parallelization into the EVM. And then in the end, having a broad concept of the design space, I then wrote some blog posts about, okay, this is the design space, these are things that we could do. As of that point, we got a lot of feedback from different stakeholders, could narrow the design space a little bit down, some first simulations. And in the end, like with block level access list, we then agreed on the final design as it is today, which is basically block level access list is a state diff plus state locations. So a signal for every state location. For the payload chunking, it was different because we already knew that other chains were doing similar things. Like, for example, on base you have flash blocks, which is already very close to the payload chunking idea. Then Solana has turbine, which is also some non-semantic chunking. I think it's non-semantic, actually, don't quote me on that. It's definitely some form of chunking. What they're doing there, calling it turbine, doing things what we do with blobs, they're doing with execution payloads. So also very interesting concept. Then there is Hyperliquid, which is this blockchain Alt L1 that launched recently, and they explore a concept where you have a big block and a small block within what we call a block today. And the small block is supposed to travel faster through the network because it's smaller. And they also allow the small block to have access to additional functionality like an order book, like an Oracle, and stuff like this. Yeah, Polkadot, Aptos. There are many of those chains that they do interesting stuff when it comes to some small parts of the protocol, at least, right? And it's very interesting to then think, okay, could this be applied to Ethereum somehow? And for payload chunking, how I started working about it was basically looking at, okay, blocks are turning quite big if we want to 10x the gas limit, and the average block size is 100 kilobytes today, then the average block size would be 1 megabyte in the future. And uploading and downloading 1 megabytes to all of your peers as fast as possible is definitely a challenge, because we know that bandwidth is already a quite constrained resource today. So I was thinking, okay, what about changing the streaming process, right? Today we compress blocks over the networking layer with snappy compression, and you could also use a different compression mechanism that allows actual block streaming on the network. Or you could do something like Solana is doing with taking the bytes that what is a block, and then erasure encoding it, and then sending it over the network in parallelizable chunks. So there are ideas that sometimes we know a problem, like the non-existent parallelization, and then we just meet somewhere and jam about this idea for a while to explore some solutions. And this was the case for block level access list as an example. And for payload chunking, it's an idea that is around for a while. It's an idea that is explored on other blockchains. It's also a very opinionated. You can come up with very opinionated designs. So many blockchains do it differently and end up with similar things. On Ethereum, we are constrained by different things and have different possibilities. For example, the fact that we ship block level access lists in Amsterdam puts us ahead of all other blockchains that exist today when it comes to parallelization, because as far as I know, all the other chains only have optimistic parallelization using things like block STM. So as soon as you really want to craft a block that is not parallelizable, you will be able to do so. So the only defense against stuff like that is being a permission blockchain and controlling who the validators are, to ensure that there will never be a validator who creates like a malicious block that is not parallelizable. And with block level access on Ethereum, we get perfect parallelization, which means you can execute every transaction in parallel to each other. And this then puts us into a different spot when thinking about, okay, what is the optimal block structure in the future? And yeah, just to mention those two specific topics.
Got it. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much, Toni. We have 5 minutes left. So if there is maybe one more question from the audience, let's hear it. The very last chance to ask Toni somebody, and I'm going to take it for myself if you guys don't ask. So please. Nothing. Okay. So one thing that I was curious about is, I mean, it's been the restructuring recently and a lot of things changed, but for you personally, you are now the leader of the protocol prototyping. You have like your own team now. So yeah, how does that feel? How are you handling this, your responsibility, whether it's different, what you have learned, and yeah, how is it like being a team leader?
Yeah, to me, it felt very much like what was previously the applied research group, which was the team I was in before the restructuring, now turned into the prototyping team. So my day-to-day work didn't really change, except of course that I'm now managing the team. I was very lucky after the restructuring, because of course, if you look at the team, my team members, right? It is very much we have people with a very broad set of skills, right? So we're involved in repricing stuff. We contribute to ideas like inclusion lists. There are people being able to contribute to the specs and the testing frameworks and so on. So I think this is actually the biggest strength of our team. And to me, it feels great that we finally are focusing on exactly that part of or that kind of work, where how do we make sure those iteration cycles between research and core development get are executed as fast as possible, such that we such that we in the end ship faster, because I think this is super important. We have to ship faster, and we have to take that seriously. We have to think competitively, and on that front, I really like that we, as the prototyping team, we have a lot of freedom in exploring upcoming ideas, prototyping them, and then going deep into what are the actual challenges we might expect with certain proposals, and what are the actual benefits we can expect.
Got it. Thank you so much. It's also, I like just to hear your motivation and how excited you are to just push the Ethereum further. So it's great. I think you're in the right place there. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. We actually have 2 minutes to spare, so one more room for a quick question. I mean, Toni likes to talk a lot. I expected it will take longer, but if you guys have one more question, please take the opportunity. Oh, Shane, go ahead.
Yeah, with EPBS, it pretty significantly changes the CL and adds things like trustless payments and whatnot. And I know you've explored that design space a bit. I'm just curious if now that it's actually happening for Amsterdam, if EF will do like more research on top with things like timing games as well that has come up. Just curious if y'all are still thinking about this or whatnot.
Yeah, this is a good question, and it's definitely one of the things I'm thinking most about in the recent months. Like, how should we structure the slot within? How should we structure the slot in Ethereum, and what do we do with those 12 seconds? And how can we parallelize it best and make sure that every resource is like smoothed out over the whole block or over the whole slot? EPBS is an interesting topic because I was very much against EPBS, not like from the beginning, but I never liked the complexity, and we even had a counter proposal to it, which was 7886 delayed execution. It's a very broad design space there. So EPBS is a very opinionated design, I would say. I'm not saying it's not good. I'm actually a big fan of EPBS too, because it gives us a lot of scaling. So it's actually a super powerful feature. It's just the fact that it's three things in one proposal. So it gives us a separation of the execution block and the CL block. Then it gives us trustless MEF boost payments, and then it gives us the builders that are now staked entities, and we can basically apply slashings or anything on top of builders when we don't like what they're doing in the future. So it's actually super powerful, and I like that part of it. But of course, on the other hand, it's super complex. So if you look at the 7732 specs, that's the EP number about EPBS today, it's not super easy to understand. Quite the opposite, actually. It's quite hard to read. It's quite hard to reason about it. If you look at the fork choice changes, they look kind of scary. But in the end, if you go very deep into that topic, it's a very interesting one because it touches so many different parts of the protocol, and things like EPBS right now, it's scheduled for inclusion in Amsterdam, so it's very likely to happen at this point. And right now, I'm not like looking into its flaws, but more like trying to understand how it's spec'd and trying to get deeper on that front. I know there are problems with the timing games, for example, that you um, it's not really called the timing game here. It's the free option problem. I tend to call it the option problem. Yeah, it's very interesting consideration there. I don't think right now people are open to change the EPBS design drastically to tackle those open problems, and we would just be like, okay, let's live with them and see how bad they play out in practice. But yeah, we're still early in the process, so yeah, it's early enough to still to do changes to EPBS if it turns out that the option problem is actually a bigger problem as it might appear right now. I think based on the most recent numbers, what I saw, it's 0.8% of all slots might be missed in case if all validators connect to one relay, or let's assume all relays offer that service, then 0.8% of all slots would be missed just because people would execute this option thing and would deliberately miss their slot. This is, of course, a very bad outcome in the end if that would be the case. But I don't think that theory always plays out in practice here. Of course, I have a very strong opinion that we should design the protocol in a incentive compatible way, that we don't rely on a blog post recommending people what to do and what not to do. So I would feel better if we solve that problem through economic incentives instead of the social layer becoming active.
Got it. Yeah, and I think also there's ideas of like moving the payload timing committee deadline closer to the attestation deadline, so you have a short gap in when you can
Right,
actually
but this
exercise that
cost
option.
scaling. What do you think about this?
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, they're at odds with each other.
Right. Yeah.
Yes. So you try to find that happy medium. It's a very difficult gap to find. Yes.
Because in
1
the end,
second between the two deadlines, things like that. Yeah.
exactly. And in the end, one of the very strong arguments why we went for EPBS instead of delayed execution was because it gives us even better pipelining, because you don't need to send so because the object, the beacon block, is super small compared to, so the PTC only checks the availability of the payload essentially, and it doesn't need to have the full payload yet. And for delayed execution, this was not possible. So you always attesters always needed the execution payload at least downloaded. And now, if we would now say, okay, let's just move the deadline for further into the slot, then this argument that was once a big reason to go for EPBS would then turn invalid. And to me, it would then still feel like, okay, then delayed execution might actually be the better choice, and we should ship 7886 instead of 7732. But yeah, it's a can of worms that I won't open now, definitely. But it's a super interesting discussion, and I will definitely continue engaging in that one.
Cool. Thank you for that.
You
I
there,
just saw
Mario?
Mario's thing. Yeah, it says his internet died.
Ah.
So he
Yeah,
say
he says,
goodbye to Tony.
yeah. Goodbye.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you,
you.
guys.
And
Bye.
feel free
Yeah.
to approach me when you are at DevConnect or something. Happy to talk to each of you.
Cheers.
Bye bye.